This is a real human brain. Well, it was, until a hot cloud of ash turned it into glass. This crazy transformation happened almost 2,000 years ago, when Mount Vesuvius decided it was a good day to erupt and destroy cities like Pompeii, Atlantis, and Herculaneum. This particular brain belonged to a young man who lived in 79 CE in Herculaneum. Not the most famous Roman town, but it was the first place that was discovered under Vesuvius's ashes way back in 1709. Around 200 years later, archaeologists found the remains of this young man lying face down on a bed. All the smoke and ash probably made him disoriented, so while most of the citizens of Herculaneum rushed to the shore, hoping to be rescued, the brain guy ended up trapped inside a building and passed out. Weirdly enough, this saved his brain from completely disappearing. How in the world does a brain turn into glass? Well, when Mount Vesuvius erupted, it didn't expel just lava. It also sent away a really hot cloud of ash before the solidified lava could flow down. This type of lava, known as pyroclastic flow, could get as hot as 869 degrees Fahrenheit. An insane temperature, we know. Hot enough to melt your brain, but not hot enough to turn it into glass. The cloud of ash, however, can reach temperatures between 932 degrees Fahrenheit to 1,112 degrees Fahrenheit. But to turn something into glass, you don't just need heat, you need rapid cooling too. To put it simply, you have to heat something to a very high temperature until it melts into a liquid. If you let it cool down slowly, the molecules of this liquid will start to calmly organize themselves in the shape of crystals. But if this something cools down super fast, it will solidify in whatever shape the liquid was. It's like making ice cubes. If you pour water into a tray and stick it in the freezer, it will turn into ice because it cools down quickly. But if you leave the water out at room temperature, it'll just evaporate. This means that the brain melted due to a really high temperature, but before it could crystallize, for example, or just boil away, it got really cold. The flow from the eruption was not hot enough for this to happen, but the cloud of ash that reached town before the pyroclastic flow was hot enough to start this process, and fast enough to leave just at the right time. To figure out the exact temperature needed for this brain-to-glass transformation, scientists used a technique called differential scanning calorimetry. This fancy name basically means that they heat up glass shards to see when they start to change shape. They discovered that the cloud of ash had to be exactly 950 degrees Fahrenheit hot for the brain cells to start melting. Now, remember how I said this guy was inside a building, but most of the citizens were outside? Well, those people were also exposed to this drastic change in temperature, but they didn't turn into glass because they were not being protected by the walls of a building. The protection provided by the skull surely helped our guy, but it was not enough. And since other people didn't have the same protection, their brains basically poofed. And before you ask, no other parts of his body turned into glass. You see, you need some liquid for the glass-making process to happen. The brain has a lot of water and fat, which makes it a prime candidate for the glassification process. Yes, I've just made that word up. Other organs might have contained liquid, but they weren't as protected as the brain, so they were destroyed by the heat. And bones? Well, bones don't have enough liquid, so they just remained the same. The ones that didn't char, anyway. When the brain turned into glass, it looked a lot like an obsidian stone, a type of volcanic glass formed by the cool lava of a volcano. Even the forensic archaeologist who discovered this glassified brain thought it was just a stone at first. He was studying the bones of our hero when he noticed something shining inside of his skull, right in the middle of all the volcanic ash that filled it. To his surprise, this thing was way more fragile than obsidian and smaller too, with some fragments being only a few millimeters large. He only figured this was part of that guy's brain after he took the glass to the lab. With the help of a microscope, he discovered that this was not a stone but an organic tissue, which is basically cells that form our organs. This organic tissue was made by protein, a molecule produced by living things like animals and plants. And this was not just any protein. This one was specific to the human brain because every organ is made of different types of protein. The researchers also found nerve cells preserved inside this glass, complete with the tendrils that help them receive and send messages. The microscope also showed what was left of myelin, a fatty substance that gives a speed boost to the messages traveling along the nerves. This isn't the first time scientists discovered preserved human brains. In fact, more than 4,000 brains have been found since the 17th century. It may not look like a big number, but keep in mind that finding only the brain preserved in a skeleton while the other organs are gone is not that common. You see, the human brain is actually the first thing that decomposes when we're 6 feet under, and it usually turns into liquid. When scientists stumble upon a human brain, it's usually dried, frozen, or literally turned into soap. A brain can be dehydrated if a person perishes in a place that is very hot, like a desert. Frozen brains are found, obviously, in places that are super cold, like polar tundras. A brain turned into soap may sound weird, but the saponification process is not that rare. You need a lot of fat and oils to make soap, and the human brain is filled with this. It's a complex process, but if you find a brain that turned into soap, it must have been buried in a place that is very wet and has little oxygen. Back in 1982, for example, construction workers found dozens of human skeletons in a pond in Florida. They were all 8,000 years old, and 91 of them actually had their brains still somewhat intact. And by intact, I mean they turned into jelly soap. During the 2000s, the brains of 45 people were found in Spain, preserved because of this saponification process. This discovery helped researchers understand the chemical composition of the brains and even the weather conditions of the moment when these people passed away. Scientists also discovered two 3,700-year-old brains in Turkey that belonged to a middle-aged man and a teenager that were trying to escape an attack on their city. This time, the brains turned into charcoal because of a super hot fire. And even though their skulls preserved the brains in this state, the heating and cooling process was probably not intense enough to glassify them. But this? It's the first time in history that scientists have found a brain that naturally turned into glass. It's like finding a unicorn, but in a more scientific way. So what does this discovery mean? Well, for starters, it gives us a glimpse into the lives of those who existed such a long time ago. Secondly, it taught scientists an amazing way to preserve the human brain. It also shows just how powerful nature can be. Powerful enough to turn a brain into glass, but delicate enough to preserve it for thousands of years. So, let's give a shout out to the young man who unknowingly contributed to science. He probably had no idea that his brain would one day be the star of a groundbreaking discovery. His tragic end has given us a fascinating peek into the past.
Ooh, from giant spiders to venomous snakes, we all get freaked out by Australian creatures. Yeah, me too. But newly discovered fossils show that things were way more dangerous 120 million years ago, when this land was completely ruled by massive razor-clawed megaraptors. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't around then. These dinosaurs were about 26 feet long and walked on two legs, just like the famous T-Rex. They were fast, fierce hunters, with a superpower: their hug. Yep, their massive, muscular forearms had huge curved claws, perfect for grabbing and holding onto prey. Uh-oh. They would wrap their arms around their poor victims, just like a hug, and trap them with no chance of escape. And even though their teeth were quite small, they were still sharp enough to rip through flesh. The first time we heard about megaraptors was in the late 90s, when a paleontologist discovered their fossils in the region of Patagonia, Argentina. Since then, no one has ever found a complete skeleton, only fragments. But probably the most important one yet was uncovered in Australia at the beginning of this year. Researchers were exploring Victoria's stunning coastline when they stumbled upon megaraptor fossils. First, they spotted bones from its lower legs and a few vertebrae washed up on the beach. Even though they were working with just a couple of fragments, a deeper analysis confirmed that these belonged to a megaraptor. And not just any megaraptor, it was the oldest one ever discovered. This discovery gets even more exciting because it adds weight to the theory that these dinosaurs might have originated in Australia. But we already knew that they roamed the land down under since early 2023, when researchers found the top of a megaraptor skull in the country. So let's rewind a bit. We first found their remains in Argentina, right? Right. But then, years later, researchers found fossils of the same family of dinosaurs on the other side of the world, in Australia. If the ones in Oceania were older, how did these creatures end up in South America? Of course, they didn't fly there. They didn't cross continents by swimming either, although there is a theory that they could swim. Remember, we're talking about the dinosaur era, which happened millions of years ago. And back then, Australia and Argentina were actually pretty close. Basically, they were one. Both lands were part of the supercontinent known as Gondwana, and they were connected through Antarctica. Wait, but wasn't this path freezing? I mean, yeah, these dinos had to pass through Antarctica to get to their destination, but they weren't freezing their tails off. This all happened during the mid-Cretaceous period, when the weather was super warm. Back then, the poles were covered in plants, not ice. So let's just say they took full advantage of the good weather to make the crossing. Now, about 180 million years ago, Gondwana started to break apart. At some point, Australia drifted away from the supercontinent, cutting it off from other landmasses, including South America. That's why the same dinosaurs showed up in completely different parts of the world. Mystery solved. Now, let's get back to that recent discovery. The researchers didn't just find a few traces of megaraptors on the beach. In total, they uncovered 250 dinosaur bones at the site, but only 5 of them were really important. They belonged to 3 different species of dinosaurs that, as it turns out, all lived in Victoria at the same time. So yeah, we've already talked about those first 2 bones. They were from the megaraptor. Next, we have a shin bone from a Onenlagiine. That's my best shot at pronouncing it. It's a dino also known as the southern raptor. This is a type of dromaeosaur with a long snout. And the last 2 shin bones of different sizes came from a Carcharodontosaurus, whose name means shark-toothed lizard. This one is a particularly big deal for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's the first evidence that this species lived in Australia. And number 2, it was small, and that is pretty surprising since we've always thought of this species as being massive. Fossils found in Argentina, for example, show this dinosaur reached a length of about 36 feet. But the one in Australia was much smaller, measuring only around 6 to 10 feet long. And that's still plenty big. Basically, what we're saying is that the way predators were ranked in these 2 parts of the world was completely different. In South America, Carcharodontosaurs grew to massive T-Rex-sized giants, towering over megaraptors and dominating the landscape. But in Australia, it was the complete opposite. There, huge, powerful megaraptorids roamed the land alongside smaller Carcharodontosaurs. So the predator dynamic was different. And all of this just shows how unique the ecosystem in Victoria was back then. Although isolated dinosaur bones have been found in Western and South Australia, most of the fossils come from the eastern part of the country, like Queensland. And there, researchers dug up something really, really rare – a well-preserved dinosaur skull. The study shows that this bone belonged to the 4th discovered specimen of Titanosaur. This group includes those massive long-necked dinosaurs. They look like the Brachiosaurus, but some of them were even bigger, reaching 120 feet long. The skull, discovered in 2018, belongs to this guy, whose pronunciation is above my pay grade, and the research points out that it roamed the Earth around 98 million years ago. Thanks to this find, scientists were able to recreate for the very first time what its face might have looked like. Probably after checking out the illustration, they thought, hey, it looks a lot like its cousin. They were talking about another species of Titanosaur. this other unpronounceable guy. And guess where they used to live? Yep, in Argentina. So, this research also supports the theory that dinosaurs crossed between South America and Australia during the mid-Cretaceous period. Now, this wasn't the only secret buried in Queensland, though. In 2024, researchers working there discovered the fossilized remains of a new species of pterosaur, about 100 million years old. These creatures were the first vertebrates that could actually fly, existing alongside dinosaurs. They were massive, powerful predators, with wingspans of up to 36 feet. But these remains belong to a new species within the pterosaur group, which they have named Hakuna Matata, or something similar. Compared to their cousins, they were on the smaller side, with a wingspan of about 15 feet. Still, that's bigger than a snowy albatross, the largest flying bird we have today. This species of pterosaurs were terrifying beasts, flying over the ocean to hunt for prey. Once they spotted their victim, they'd snap open their 60-centimeter jaws, filled with sharp spike-like teeth, and, well, I guess there was no escaping that. The last incredible discovery we're talking about today also comes from Queensland. For over 20 years, students walked past a plain-looking rock at Biloela State High School completely unaware that it held 66 dinosaur footprints, and they date back about 200 million years. These prints were made by a group of these Latin-named guys. They were small dinosaurs with 3 toes on each foot, and it seems like they were all over Queensland around that early Jurassic period. The rock they found at the school worked like a snapshot, giving us a better idea of what these dinosaurs were like and how they behaved. After taking a closer look, researchers found that the footprints came from 47 individual dinosaurs. This group was probably walking along or maybe crossing a waterway when their footprints got marked in the white clay. And the study also discovered that they were likely moving at less than 4 miles per hour at the time. So we only discovered those marks in Australia. But fossils of the same species found in other countries showed that they had these long legs, a big chunky body, short arms, and this tiny head with a beak. But honestly, they don't sound as scary when you realize they only ate plants. Whew. No man shall ever find my tomb. That's what, according to rumors, Cleopatra once said. Rumor has it really wasn't about the gender. She wanted no living soul to disturb her, and I think she meant that no human would ever discover the location of her grave. But, surprisingly, it was indeed a woman who was closer than anyone before to finally discovering the Queen's resting place. Meet Kathleen Martinez Berry, a criminal lawyer turned archaeologist. She got so intrigued with Cleopatra's story that she packed her bags and went to Egypt with no official support and even no permission from the authorities. All she had was pure determination to find the Queen's tomb. Now, you could say Kathleen had always been ahead of the game. She skipped grades in school, mastered piano, chess, swimming, and martial arts, and grew up listening to top intellectuals debating in her home. And she even got her law degree at just 19, and archaeology was her side passion. She had never actually been to Egypt, never dug up a single artifact. But her fascination with Cleopatra went all the way back to an argument with her father in 1990. That day, she walked into his library looking for a copy of Antony and Cleopatra by Shakespeare. Her dad, Fausto Martinez, a professor and legal expert, casually called Cleopatra a seductress. Kathleen wasn't having it. She fired back, arguing that history had been totally unfair to Cleopatra. The Romans, she said, wanted to destroy her reputation, and for centuries, people had just believed their version of the story. The debate went on for hours, and in the end, her father admitted maybe he had judged Cleopatra too harshly. That conversation changed everything for Kathleen. From that day on, she read every ancient text she could find, especially Plutarch's account of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that Cleopatra wasn't just some queen who fell for the wrong guy. She was a genius, playing a dangerous political game to keep Egypt independent. And the more she read, the more she started thinking, what if everyone had been looking for Cleopatra's tomb in the wrong place? That thought stuck with her. When she was caring for her second child, she earned a master's in archaeology. Multitasking. That reignited an obsession that would take over her life, uncovering the truth about Cleopatra. Even though most experts believe that Cleopatra's tomb, along with the final resting place of 13 other Ptolemaic rulers, lies somewhere beneath modern-day Alexandria, Dr. Martinez has a different idea. She believes Cleopatra was buried at Taposiris Magna, an ancient temple dedicated to Osiris, the Egyptian deity of the afterlife. But she still needed an ancient foundation plate. These plates, about the size of a smartphone, were placed beneath important temple structures and often contained inscriptions explaining when and why the temple was built. If she could find a plate that confirmed the temple was dedicated to Isis, Cleopatra's patron deity, she'd have solid proof that this was the right place to look. Nothing could deter Martinez. She excavated the entire temple site, digging deeper than anyone before her. Her team found coins with Cleopatra's name and face stamped on them. It meant Cleopatra had a direct connection to this site. Then, they uncovered something even more interesting: a tunnel used to bring water to people, leading straight from the temple into the Mediterranean Sea. So, if parts of the temple had already sunken into the water, could Cleopatra's tomb be down there too? Martinez needed proof to convince Egyptian authorities to let her search underwater. And, against all odds, she found the missing foundation plate. On it, the pharaoh offered a large area of Nubia to deity Isis. That was it, the confirmation she needed. The temple was indeed dedicated to Isis, proving her theory wasn't just speculation. If one temple was on land, Martinez suspected the second temple, possibly Cleopatra's tomb, had collapsed into the sea. She needed help from experts in underwater archaeology, so she reached out to Robert Ballard, the guy who discovered the Titanic. With support from the Egyptian authorities, she and her team began exploring the waters off the coast of Alexandria. And what they found was mind-blowing. Underwater, they discovered massive stone structures, some standing 6 to 10 feet tall, right where the coastline would have been thousands of years ago. They also found basalt blocks, the same material used in the statues from the first temple. That meant one thing: those weren't just random rocks. They were the remains of a lost city, buried beneath the sea for centuries. Now, we can only wait and see whether Martinez and her team will be able to unravel one of the greatest mysteries of the past left by the outstanding woman that was Cleopatra. Here's some backstory. After her father, Ptolemy VII, passed away, Egypt's throne went to both Ptolemy VIII and Cleopatra, or so it seemed. Cleopatra, just 18 at the time, allegedly married her 10-year-old brother. Yeah, ancient royalty had some different customs, though there's no solid proof of that. But sibling love didn't last long. Young Ptolemy decided he wanted all the power for himself and tried to push Cleopatra out. Forced to flee the country, she didn't just sit around feeling sorry for herself. She raised an army, ready to march back and take what was hers. That's how, at 21, she was already in the Sinai Desert, leading an army and planning her return to the throne. Now, by that time, Cleopatra had already been locked in a powerful political, and not only political, alliance with Julius Caesar. In June 47 BC, she gave birth to a son, Ptolemy Caesar, better known as Caesarion, who, many believe, was Caesar's child. But that didn't stop her from playing by Egyptian royal rules. And her husband number 2, her other brother, Ptolemy XIV. Yeah, despite her ongoing affair with Caesar, Cleopatra married yet another sibling, because, in her world, keeping the throne in the family was the name of the game. Now, marriage aside, Cleopatra's bond with Caesar stayed strong. She even traveled to Rome with Ptolemy XIV for a state visit. But instead of playing the role of a dutiful queen, she stayed in Caesar's private villa by the Tiber River. But after Julius Caesar lost his life in 44 BCE on the Ides of March, Cleopatra's political standing became shaky. To make matters worse, her brother-husband Ptolemy XIV passed away soon after, and some suspect Cleopatra had a hand in it, leaving her as the sole ruler of Egypt. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Mark Antony was rising to power as Caesar's presumed successor. Wanting to size up the Queen of Egypt, he summoned Cleopatra, and she did not disappoint. Sailing into town on a lavish barge, dressed as a deity, Cleopatra made quite an entrance. Antony was instantly mesmerized, so much so that he left his third wife back in Rome and followed Cleopatra to Alexandria, where their relationship turned into a full-blown royal affair. The two had 3 children together. Together, they waged war against Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, in a battle for control of the Roman Empire. The last time the queen was seen, she was in her mausoleum, dressed in full royal splendor, diadem on her head, lying on what Plutarch called a golden couch. When Antony and Cleopatra lost at Actium, Octavian's forces marched into Alexandria. Cleopatra apparently knew the end was near, so she locked herself inside her mausoleum, surrounded by gold, silver, pearls, and priceless art. Those were the treasures she threatened to burn rather than let the Romans take them. Antony, meanwhile, wasn't going to let the Romans capture him alive. He wounded himself with his own sword, but before he passed away, he was carried to Cleopatra's side. She held him as he took his last breath in her arms. A little over a week later, Cleopatra made her own choice. Rather than face humiliation as Octavia's prisoner, she ended her life. Legend says it was the bite of a deadly asp, though history isn't quite clear on that. At the time, Cleopatra was only 39. Sounds like a rather full life to me. Scientists have recently discovered Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages under a medieval castle in Italy. They followed a newly found 15th century sketch by the creator of the Mona Lisa and found one of the unexplored architectural wonders from the age of the Renaissance. Construction of the Sforza Castle started back in 1358, but it was destroyed about a century later during a local crisis. Then, in 1450, Francesco Sforza, the Duke of Milan, decided to rebuild it on the old ruins. After he passed away, his son Ludovico took over and kept improving the castle. He brought in some of the best artists of the time, including Leonardo da Vinci, to decorate its walls. We can still see Leonardo's frescoes today in the Room of Wooden Boards. While he was working at the castle, da Vinci also recorded some historical underground passages hidden beneath the outer wall. The drawing, dated between 1487 and 1490, was found at the Institut de France in Paris. The sketch is highly precise, and it proves that Leonardo was really interested in fortification design and was great at documenting existing structures. Historical records show that Ludovico ordered the building of an underground passageway that led straight to a basilica, where his wife was buried. Ludovico married Beatrice in 1491, and they had a happy but tragically short marriage, as Beatrice passed away while giving birth in 1497. The Duke locked himself away for weeks, grew a beard, and wore only black clothes while he was mourning his beloved wife. The secret tunnel may have stretched over a half a mile and would let Ludovico visit her grave in private. It could have served as an escape route if the castle was ever under siege. The existence of the tunnels remained one of the mysteries of the Renaissance for years, as no one knew for sure they were there. But now, scientists finally uncovered the secret history. They used a combination of ground-penetrating radar and laser scanning to build up an accurate 3D model of all the structures under the castle. They found the tunnels da Vinci alluded to in his drawings, and it looks like they may have only been a small part of a whole system of historical underground passages. The goal is to create a complete digital twin of the castle that will not only show all the preserved constructions, but also the ancient ones that are no longer visible. They also plan to add augmented reality to the virtual paths to let visitors discover Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages. Now, we don't know if the genius actually took part in constructing the hidden passages that scientists recently discovered, but we do know about some other Leonardo da Vinci inventions. He created the first satellite-like map in 1502, long before photography or satellites were even a concept. A famous figure in Italy, Cesare Borgia, invited Leonardo to a small town called Imola, near Bologna, to create a highly detailed map for him. Back then, maps were not very precise, as no one had figured out how to show exact distances on a smaller scale. Instead, people spent a lot of time decorating them with dragons, roses, fancy castles, mountain ranges, flowers, and other artistic details. These maps look more like beautiful paintings meant to be displayed, rather than practical tools for navigation. But Cesare Borgia wanted something truly functional, and Leonardo managed to create something revolutionary in the field of cartography. If you compare satellite images of Imola today with Leonardo's map, the similarities are striking. He captured every alley, curve of the streets, roadways, and even the exact sizes of the buildings. And he did it all by hand, using just a pencil, ruler, compass, and several of his own clever inventions. To gather all the necessary data, the genius walked through the streets for weeks using a large wheel that spun as he moved, recording the distance with a cable. Using the magnetic compass, he determined precise directions. He also developed a tool called the bussola, which measured angles inside a circle. With this, he could track the exact turns of each street and the size of the intersections. He figured out the distances between houses and major roads. Then, back at home, he used his notes and calculations to draw the map to scale with incredible precision. In his work, Da Vinci also used a technique developed by Florentine humanist Leon Battista Alberti. He created a mapping method where you could place an entire city inside a circle using polar coordinates. At the center of the city, 8 straight lines met, representing the main directions of a compass. Leonardo used this system to divide the town into 8 sections. He didn't overlook even the smallest buildings, which made his map one of the most advanced of its time. The Italian genius had a big dream to build a machine that could let people fly. He studied how birds, bats, and kites moved through the air and designed a special flying machine. He believed that if he could copy their movements, humans might be able to soar like them. Da Vinci's design looked a lot like a bat, with 2 large pointed wings that stretched over 33 feet wide. He planned to build the frame from lightweight pine wood and cover it with raw silk to make it strong but not too heavy. The person flying it would lie on their stomach on a wooden board in the center. To make the wings flap, the pilot had to pedal a crank with their feet, which was connected to a system of rods and pulleys. There was also a hand crank for extra power and even a headpiece to help steer. As the person moved their hands and feet, the wings would flap and twist, just like a bird's. But there was one big problem. Humans aren't strong enough to make the machine lift off the ground. Even though it might have worked once in the air, there was no way for a person to get it flying on their own. Leonardo probably realized this, but his amazing idea still inspired flying machines that came centuries later. Da Vinci was way ahead of his time with many of his inventions, but his idea for a humanoid robot was especially futuristic. He was working under the patronage of the Sforza family, the one that had those ancient tunnels of Italy built. The genius designed a mechanical knight that could move its arms, turn its neck, and even open and close its mouth. Da Vinci had good knowledge of anatomy and the mechanics of body movements that helped him. His unusual creation used an external system of cables. A hand crank set it in motion, and there was also an internal gear-driven mechanism. About 450 years later, Da Vinci's detailed sketches of the robotic knight were rediscovered in the 1950s. Several researchers tried to recreate the robot from those sketches. In 2002, a roboticist who developed systems for NASA and Lockheed Martin took inspiration from the old notes and built a functioning model of Da Vinci's robotic knight. Another design Leonardo created for Duke Sforza was a special kind of bridge that could be taken apart and carried easily. It was made for defense forces who needed to cross rivers or moats while traveling. This bridge would swing across the water and land on the other side. It had wheels and used a rope and pulley system, so it could be set up quickly and packed away just as fast. To keep it steady, it even had a special weight to help balance it. Leonardo wrote in his notes that the bridge was light yet strong, and he designed several bridges like this for the Duke. One of his other designs was a bridge that could be built very quickly, and the defense forces would move across multiple rivers. As scientists continue to study Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages, they reveal new chapters in human history. Who knows what other unexplored architectural structures they will find.
This is not a dune set. This is a very real desert in Niger. Jado was probably built by the nomadic Sao people and is filled with ksars, which are fortified houses made of salt and clay, with giant walls and secret passages. Located deep in the desert, it was once a vital stop for trans-Saharan caravans, but is now a hotspot for smugglers and bandits. The site has been off-limits since 2002 due to its dangers. The origin of the ksars remain a mystery. No archaeological studies have been conducted, leaving many questions unanswered. Even today, shifting sands reveal and conceal parts of these ancient ruins, fueling local speculation about what might still be hidden beneath the desert. Speaking of connective tunnels, scientists were blown away by the discovery of lava tubes in Saudi Arabia. These underground passages form when molten lava cools down. Researchers believe that ancient nomadic groups may have utilized these tunnels to survive the super harsh desert climates. While excavating the tunnels, archaeologists uncovered artifacts, rock art, and skeletal remains. The art and animal bones show that the people who used the tunnels were probably sheep and goat herders. They're still piecing together whether these groups lived in the tunnels for extended periods or just used them as temporary shelters. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing for thousands of years, but it's still hiding secrets. Using special scanning technology, scientists found two hidden structures under an ancient burial ground. The first is a shallow L-shaped structure, and below it is a much larger space that could be a final resting place or a chamber. The smaller structure was filled with sand on purpose, while the deeper one might be an empty chamber. Experts believe the two are connected, possibly as an entrance leading to a secret chamber. This is big news because it might give us some more insight into who built the pyramids and why. The world is full of ancient writing, but some messages refuse to give up their secrets, like the mystery of the Bashplemi tablet. This unusual stone, pulled from a lake in Georgia, is covered in symbols no one can read. Even with modern technology, experts are completely stumped. The tablet is about the size of a book, with 60 symbols carefully carved into its surface, but 39 of them don't match any known language. Some resemble scripts from ancient civilizations in the Middle East, India, and Egypt, but none are an exact match. To make things even trickier, part of the tablet is broken off, meaning a piece of the puzzle is missing forever. To rule out a hoax, scientists studied the tablet closely. They confirmed it's made of vesicular basalt, an extremely tough local rock. Whoever carved these symbols must have been really skilled. Based on similar archaeological finds, experts believe the tablet could date back thousands of years, possibly to the late Bronze or early Iron Age. Some symbols repeat, which could mean they're numbers. Maybe it's an inventory list, a record of battles, or even an offering to the deities. Until someone cracks the code, the Bashplemi tablet remains an unsolved mystery from the depths of history. Experts are still stumped with what this Minoan disc might mean. The Phaistos disc is one of the most mysterious finds from the Minoan civilization. This 6-inch clay object, discovered in 1908, has strange spiral markings that no one has fully decoded yet. The disc has 241 symbols on both sides, showing everything from people and animals to tools and plants. Experts have come up with many theories about what the symbols mean. Some think it's an early form of Greek. Others suggest it's a prayer or a hymn. And some even believe it could be a letter from a king in Anatolia to a Greek ruler. Let's see who will be the first to figure this out. It's always a fun day at an archaeologist's office when they find something as big as a 2,000-year-old marble head. A French archaeologist mission went digging inside an old medieval house near Alexandria in Egypt and found a statue's head depicting an old, possibly ill man. This statue dates from the last Egyptian dynasty before it became part of the Roman Empire, and the site where it was found is associated with the likes of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. For archaeologists, even the smallest finds at this site means a lot. You've heard of Lucy, right? The Australopithecus that was an early ancestor for us humans. Well, scientists found some of her species' footprints somewhere in Tanzania. The so-called Laetoli footprints are over 3 million years old. The trail stretched 88 feet and has about 70 footprints, left behind when a bunch of early humans walked across some wet volcanic ash. What's cool is that these early humans were already walking on 2 feet, like us, not all hunched over like apes. The close spacing of the prints shows they probably had short legs and a shorter stride than we do today. In an ancient Egyptian temple, archaeologists uncovered a shrine unlike any other, a place dedicated to falcons and 2 mysterious deities. One deity had a falcon's head, while the other wore a crown with a sun disk and cow horns. But the most baffling discovery was an inscription that read, "It is improper to boil a head in here." At the heart of the shrine, there are 15 headless falcons carefully arranged on a pedestal, likely as offerings to the falcon-headed deity. One theory suggests the birds were boiled first, perhaps to pluck their feathers, before being placed in the shrine, following the strange rule carved into stone. Archaeologists also found a 13-inch iron harpoon nearby. Its true purpose remains unknown, although the shrine also held remains of fish, mammals, and bird eggs, suggesting that the rituals may have included feasting. And speaking of ancient Egypt, meet Hathor. Scientists named her after the ancient Egyptian deity of motherhood, music, and singing. This wooden statue, housed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was thought to be just a beautiful artifact, until a surprising secret was uncovered. Using an X-ray machine, experts found a mechanical operating system inside it, with pulleys and axles connecting her shoulder to her left leg. When activated, the system made her hand raise and lower, an engineering marvel from over 3,000 years ago. The statue was created during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, around 1800 BCE, and is often compared to 19th century automata due to its advanced design. It's believed the statue was used in religious ceremonies, symbolizing Hathor's role in dance and music. An unexpected discovery happened in northern Kuwait, where a Kuwaiti-Polish team uncovered a mysterious 7,500-year-old statue. The statue features an elongated skull, no mouth, narrow eyes, and a flattened nose. This feature is thought to be an Ophidian figurine, named after the Greek word for snake, and it was likely made by the Ubaid culture, a civilization known for their pottery skills. While no one knows exactly what role this weird statue played, it might have been linked to rituals or symbolic practices. Some scientists think these figurines, found in homes or final resting places, were tied to important cultural beliefs. We couldn't mention unresolved mysteries of this world without speaking about these elongated skulls. In the deserts of Peru, researchers uncovered 5 ancient skeletons, 2 with unnaturally elongated skulls. While head shaping was common in many cultures, these skulls defy explanation. Local legends tell tales of the so-called gentiles, a mysterious race banished underground by the powerful deities. Some say this is what the skulls represent. Others think this is some type of genetic anomaly, which was confirmed after finding an infant skull, too large to be artificially shaped.
Now this bad boy was the size of a husky and could maybe pass for one, except it didn't have any fur and was a top predator with extra long blade-like canine teeth. Ooh, charming. Meet the earliest known saber-toothed animal to have ever lived. It roamed the Earth well before the dinosaurs. Scientists made the description of this creature based on its fossils found on the Spanish island of Majorca in the Mediterranean Sea. About 200 million years ago, none of us were around then, the very first true mammals appeared, and they lived right alongside the dinosaurs. But if we trace the family tree of mammals even further back, we'll find an ancient group called theropsids. They didn't look like mammals we have today, but they had some key features that would eventually help define mammals. For example, theropsids had special openings on the sides of their skulls for jaw muscles, and parts of their jaw bones would later evolve into the tiny middle ear bones that all mammals, including you, have today. So, the new discovery is what might be the oldest known theropsid fossil. The fossil, which doesn't have an official species name yet, belongs to a group called Gorgonopsians. Those guys are more closely related to mammals than they are to any other living animals. Some of them were as small as cats, and others were as massive as polar bears. Gorgonopsians had some very mammal-like traits, like different types of teeth for different jobs. But unlike mammals, these ancient predators kept replacing their teeth, even their giant saber-like canines, over and over during their lives. Hey, that would be handy. Until now, the oldest Gorgonopsian fossils we knew about were around 265 million years old. But this new fossil is even older, dating back between 270 and 280 million years. The find was super detailed and complete, including its sharp knife-like fangs, part of its jaw, pieces of its spine, ribs, tailbones, and toe bones, plus most of one of its back legs. Even though the creature's skull wasn't complete, the scientists think it was about 7 inches long, and the animal itself would have been around the size of a medium-large dog, weighing between 66 and 88 pounds. But other than that, it didn't really look much like a dog. Even though it had some lizard-like features, calling it a lizard dog is totally wrong. Mammals and reptiles do share a super ancient ancestor from about 320 million years ago, but their evolutionary paths split a long time ago. When the newly found creature was alive, the island of Majorca was right in the middle of the gigantic supercontinent Pangaea. Back then, this area went through super wet and super dry seasons. Scientists have always wondered if major moments in mammal history happened in tropical places like this, but we just didn't have the right fossils to prove it. Now, with the discovery of the oldest known Gorgonopsian in Majorca, the missing pieces of the puzzle are coming together. It looks like some huge steps in mammal evolution could have happened in low-latitude environments we haven't explored much yet. The so-called gap in the fossil record might just be because paleontologists weren't looking in the right spots. Our hero of the day wasn't the only cool guy rocking the planet before dinos settled in. Over 500 million years ago, the weirdest predators to have ever existed ruled the oceans. The name is a bit tricky to pronounce, so I'm not going to. Okay, it's Anomalocaris, but it just literally means unusual shrimp. This creature looked nothing like anything alive today. Scientists think it was the first true apex predator, the orca of its time. Anomalocaris was massive for its era, as it grew up to 3 feet from its sharp grabbing arms to the tips of its tail fins. For a while, everyone thought trilobites were its go-to meal, but new research shows it wasn't strong enough to crack open trilobite armor. So instead, it was a speedy, agile hunter with awesome vision, and it often picked off soft-body animals that zipped through the open water. Now, another really cool creature from pre-dino times is a fish that could walk on land. Tiktaalik lived in marshy rivers that looked a lot like today's Amazon rainforest. It could grow up to 9 feet long, and it found its prey in rivers and inlets like a modern-day freshwater crocodile. It had a flexible neck and even some early versions of lungs, and thanks to them, it could survive both in water and out of it. Why fish like Tiktaalik started moving toward land about 395 million years ago is still a bit of a mystery. Around that time, the ancient supercontinent called Gondwana was drifting closer to the land that would become North America. This slow movement created lots of shallow swampy habitats, which were perfect places for crocodile-like animals to thrive. Plus, these areas were near the equator, so they were warm and tropical. But there wasn't a lot of food waiting for them on land, so maybe they moved there for safety reasons. There were fewer predators and better spots to lay eggs there compared to the water. Creatures first adapted to living in open water, then shallow water, then marshes and river edges, and only after a long, slow transition did they finally step fully onto land. Now, how about a millipede the size of a small car and weighing as much as a large dog? This beauty lived over 300 million years ago in what is now England. Back then, during the Carboniferous period, Earth's atmosphere had way more oxygen, over 26%, compared to today's 21%. Scientists used to think the high oxygen levels were the only reason these creatures could get so big. But back then, they found a new fossil from a time when oxygen wasn't that much higher than today. They discovered it purely by accident, when a boulder split just right and revealed one of the most complete and largest giant millipede specimens ever. This one could have lived not just in swampy areas, but also in open woodlands filled with tasty seeds, nuts, and maybe even small animals. There's a chance that this beast wasn't a slow, plant-munching crawler, but a predator that would snap up whatever it could find. After dominating the Earth for about 45 million years, the giant millipedes eventually vanished. Probably the reptiles pushed them out, clearing the way for the age of the dinosaurs. Now, in case you ever wondered what would happen if you crossed a polar bear with a saber-toothed cat, here's the answer. This guy ruled the southern ecosystems after migrating 7,000 miles across the supercontinent Pangaea around 252 million years ago. It had a tough skin like a rhino's and massive canines, perfect for tearing away huge chunks of meat, and it was an excellent runner. Once it got to its new home in what is now South Africa, it replaced a whole group of local predators. But its glory didn't last long, as closer to the end of the Permian period, massive volcanic eruptions made the weather patterns change and wiped out about 90% of all species. And because top predators are usually big, slow to grow, and not super common, they often vanish among the first when massive extinction events hit. And that's how our guy here went extinct. Our final creature of the day was a dragonfly that lived around 300 million years ago and had a wingspan of over 2 feet, 6 long, spiny legs, and huge, bulging eyes. Meganjura. This 4-winged giant is most likely the largest flying insect that ever lived, and it easily outsizes today's dragonflies, which are its distant relatives. Like modern dragonflies, Meganjura like to hang out in open areas near ponds and slow-moving streams. But unlike today's dragonflies, it wasn't just catching tiny bugs. This guy was likely the top predator in these open spaces. It used the spines on its legs like a flying trap to snatch prey out of the air, including other flying insects, small amphibians, and even lizard-like creatures. Scientists found the first fossils of Meganjura in 1880 in the coal-rich rocks in France. The fossils were incredibly well preserved and showed off the detailed vein patterns in their wings. Scientists think Meganjura grew so huge because it didn't have much competition from vertebrates, and the air back then, during the Carboniferous period, had a lot more oxygen than it does today. They found the tomb of a royal doctor who lived over 4,000 years ago, a man who held pharaohs' lives in his hands. This man knew secrets that only deities and kings were allowed to hear. And yet, when they opened his tomb in 2024, there was no body, just vivid paintings, untouched by time, and cryptic symbols carved into stone. Who was he, and why was he buried with spells linked to a scorpion deity? The tomb was buried deep beneath the sands of Saqqara. The doctor's name was Tete Nebefu. He lived around 4,100 years ago, during one of Egypt's most mysterious turning points, right at the edge of glory and collapse. These were the final days of Egypt's Old Kingdom. The sun still glinted off freshly built pyramids, but the shadows were already creeping in. The pharaoh, Pepi II, had ruled longer than anyone before him, 90 years. But by the end of his reign, the country was cracking. The power was slipping, the regional leaders were rising, and the Nile floods grew unpredictable. In this shaky period, the mysterious doctor thrived. His tomb was discovered by a Swiss-French archaeological team in the shadows of old pyramids. The weirdest part was that when they uncovered his burial chamber, they found no body, no golden treasures either. Unfortunately, the tomb had been robbed long ago. But what remained was something even more fascinating: the words and images left on the walls. The paintings are still vibrant, bright colors that somehow survived all those years underground. The walls show jars, containers, strange abstract patterns, and geometric shapes. And then there are hieroglyphs, lines and lines of sacred script carved with precision, like someone had poured their soul into every curve. These inscriptions revealed who Teti Nebi Fu truly was. Turns out, he wasn't just any doctor. He was the conjurer of Serket. Now, Serket was the female deity of scorpions, sacred and terrifying. Egyptians believed she could stop venom, heal bites, and protect the living from toxic elements. The title, Conjurer of Serket, meant Teti Nebi Fu was a specialist in treating dangerous stings and bites. And if he got an entire tomb for himself, he may have been Egypt's top expert in those things, a man who healed with both medicine and magic. But that wasn't all. He also held the title Director of Medicinal Plants, a title seen only once before in all of ancient Egypt. That means he knew the healing power of herbs, roots, and oils like no one else. Now, you might wonder, what plants in a huge land of sand? But in reality, ancient Egyptians used herbal medicine that would hold up in some labs today. They created pills, ointments, and inhalers. Most often, they chose some active ingredient, a flavor to make it easier to take, and something to deliver it into the body. Sound familiar? And yeah, they didn't have many traditional plants, so some of these ingredients were bizarre by our standards, like using crocodile dung and acacia mixed with honey. They even had formulas for anti-wrinkle creams. And apparently, our mysterious healer was also chief dentist. This title is almost never seen in ancient records. Evidence of Egyptian dentists is incredibly rare. Turns out, our ancient genius didn't just fight stings and study plants. He was also trusted with teeth and jaws, which were actually a huge problem in ancient Egypt. These people may have built wonders, but their teeth paid the price. Ancient Egyptians constantly caught grains of sand in their mouths. They often ate grit-filled bread and raw vegetables, which wore down enamel and caused a horrible condition called attrition. This led to tons of problems, including tooth loss. They had to improvise back in the day. For example, crafting the world's oldest known toothpaste from crushed rock, mint, and pepper, which ironically only made things worse for the gums. Or a toothpaste from things like eggshells, pumice, and natron, a salty mineral used for cleaning. They were also inventing mouthwashes from celery, bran, and herbs to ease the problem. Some mummies were even found with crude metal braces and gold wires attaching missing teeth. Though we're not sure if these were for the living, or was it just a nice little addition added as an afterlife gift. So, Teti Nebi Fu specialized in all these fields. 3 rare titles for one man. Now, back in the day, he must have been admired as incredibly knowledgeable. In a world without modern science, he would have been like a sorcerer who knows how some leaf or bark could save a life. That's why archaeologists believe Teti Nebi Fu wasn't just any doctor. He was, most likely, the royal physician, the one who treated the pharaoh himself. We don't know for sure which king he served. Maybe it was Pepi II, and who knows, maybe that's why the guy lived so long. But if that was the case, Teti Nebi Fu may have lived through the final moments of the Old Kingdom, watching the Golden Age crumble from inside the palace walls. And then he was buried. The body was looted, or perhaps just lost to time. But the team says they're still studying the tomb, still uncovering the traces of this incredible man. Overall, ancient Egyptians were practicing medicine on a crazy advanced level. Some practices feel familiar even today. They had hospitals, specialists, surgeries, and many more things, even medical schools. Both men and women were allowed to be doctors. They healed with various methods and practiced surgery with actual tools, scalpels, forceps, even sutures. Some doctors treated only the eyes, others the teeth, the stomach, or even what they called the hidden diseases. They knew how to clean and dress wounds, could set broken bones using splints made of wood or reeds wrapped in linen, and even prevented infections. There were even proctologists. They also built the first prosthetics, like a wooden toe with leather straps that help people walk normally again. The oldest known prosthetic is 3,000 years old. Now, the most shocking part is how they actually even tried to remove tumors. A recent study looked at a 4,000 years old skull. It belonged to a man in his 30s. There were signs of past tumors, and around 3 of them, there were marks, surgical cuts made with a metal tool. That suggests someone attempted to remove or study them, maybe treatment, maybe an autopsy. There was another skull of a woman over 50 years old. It also showed similar signs, but with healed fractures from an earlier injury, which is amazing because her treatment might have actually been successful. Being a healer in this society meant something powerful. It meant being a priest, a scientist, and a magician all at once. To ancient Egyptians, medicine was a necessary art, and they treated it with as much reverence as they did their deities. That's because they believed that sickness could be both physical and spiritual. So a doctor could recite a spell while applying a salve, and a lot of their treatments worked. The reputation of doctors in ancient Egypt was so strong that leaders from other parts of the ancient world, like Persia, actually sought them out. Even Homer, the Greek poet, once said the Egyptians were the most skilled healers of all. Of course, their understanding of the human body wasn't perfect. For example, they thought the heart controlled thought and emotion. They also didn't know what the brain really did. But their approach, observe symptoms, diagnose, and treat, well, that's modern medicine. Sure, they prayed over the wound, but they also healed it, didn't they? Their most famous physician was Imhotep. That guy was a true polymath, an architect, priest, and a healer who became so revered he was later worshipped as a deity of medicine. Yep, a human who was so cool they turned him into a deity. He lived 2,000 years before Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine. And yet, some people joke we should drop the Hippocratic Oath altogether and swear an Imhotepic oath instead. These people weren't just laying the foundations of pyramids, they were laying the foundations of healthcare. Archaeologists have been studying Petra in Jordan for 200 years, and in 2024, they found something they had never seen before. It's a tomb with at least 12 complete human skeletons and artifacts that are over 2,000 years old right in front of the treasury. Bronze, iron, and ceramic items were placed with the deceased, which shows how people honored their loved ones when they passed away. It's a rare chance for scientists to learn more about the Nabateans, an ancient group of Arabian nomads who built Petra. The objects found in the tomb under Petra's treasury are in amazing condition, but the skeletons became fragile because it's damp inside the tomb. They plan to study the remains and extract DNA to see if the people in the tomb were related. While some scientists are solving tomb mysteries, others have trained AI to find new ancient sites for them. They've created an algorithm that works with a special type of satellite imagery. This technique uses radio waves that can peek under things like sand, soil, and even ice to find hidden objects. AI will help search a huge desert on the Arabian Peninsula called the Empty Quarter for archaeological treasures. The lead scientists of the experiment trained the algorithm to recognize hidden locations using data from a site they had found before. The new tech can discover buried structures within 20 inches, which is very precise. Another groundbreaking tech, LiDAR, which means light detection and ranging, helped archaeologists reveal new hidden cities all around the world. LiDAR can see big structures beneath layers of vegetation and map even subtle changes in ancient landscapes. They use it to scan large areas from a small plane flying over places that aren't so easy to study from the ground, like dense jungle. In 2024 alone, they found new Maya settlements in southern Mexico, gardens, roads, and rivers in Ecuador's Amazon rainforest, ancient ruins on the Pacific island of Tonga, and the remains of 2 medieval cities along the Silk Road route in Uzbekistan. Maybe some smart technology can also explain what Marge Simpson is doing on Earth in an ancient Egyptian tomb from 3,000 years ago. The drawing, featuring a woman with yellow-colored skin, a blue crown, and a green outfit, is alarmingly like the famous cartoon character. If you don't see a resemblance here, I hope you'll at least enjoy an amazingly well-preserved necklace with amethyst and agate beads. It's from another recent find from Egypt, an ancient tomb with 11 sealed burials near Luxor. Archaeologists also found 2 copper mirrors, one with a lotus-shaped handle and the second with a unique design of the deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love in ancient Egypt. The hair of the figurine was originally made from almost 4,000 mud beads. Another awesome find from 2024 is an ancient Greek shrine with intact burials, a sarcophagus, and plenty of gold inside. They think it was built before the year 300 before the Common Era, and the marble lions, also found inside, were made from the same marble as the Parthenon in Athens. Greece is so full of ancient treasures that the city of Thessaloniki will house around 300,000 of those artifacts in their new subway system. Meanwhile, archaeologists in France have found a monument unlike any other, and they can't figure out what it was used for. It's direct proof that people used to live here between the Neolithic and the early Iron Age periods. The coolest part is a monument made of 3 unique shapes that fit together like puzzle pieces. Some gravel found in the monument could mean there used to be a wooden fence called a palisade. People who built it probably used it for protection or decoration. The team studied the layers of soil around the monument to learn more about its origins. The only tools found so far were sharp flint stones, not the cartoon characters, which were used during the Neolithic period. The next step will be radiocarbon dating to figure out exactly how old the site is. Now, the oldest saddle ever found so far was found in the grave of a woman near the edge of the Taklamakan Desert in northwest China. This saddle is the oldest ever discovered. It was crafted from pieces of leather that were sewn together and stuffed with straw and animal hair to make it soft. Now, normally, things made from natural materials like this don't last very long because they rot or fall apart. But the Taklamakan Desert is so dry that it helped preserve the artifact. The herdswoman who used the saddle was buried in her full riding attire, so this proves that not only men used saddles and took part in herding and traveling. Now let's shift to Guatemala, where an ornate jade mask made by the ancient Maya people was waiting for centuries to be discovered. Scientists use radiocarbon dating to figure out the age of the mask. They believe the mask may represent a Maya storm deity, a powerful figure in their mythology. These kinds of masks were often made to honor Maya royalty, and they were placed in the tombs of kings and queens when they were buried. The king's tomb was also decorated with carvings made using tools crafted from volcanic obsidian. After 15 years of searching, scientists may have finally figured out where the altar stone of Stonehenge comes from. They compared the tiny minerals inside the altar stone with rocks from many places in Wales and England and ruled out lots of spots. Then they found the perfect match with a place in Scotland, more than 466 miles away from Stonehenge. This area might even be Orkney, a group of islands in the far northeast of Scotland where a lot was going on during the Neolithic period. The big question now is how ancient people moved such a massive stone so far. The altar stone is over 16 feet long and weighs more than 6 tons. The new theory is that they might have used boats to carry it across the coastline and rivers. Once it was close to Stonehenge, they theoretically dragged it across the land using wooden sleds, ropes, and a lot of teamwork. Meanwhile, in the north of France, an ancient home popped to the surface during the construction of a new house. It turned out to be a luxury urban house for the elite from the 2nd century of the Common Era. The inside of the house was destroyed by a fire, but under the destroyed layer, there are beautiful, real-size fresco paintings. Turkish archaeologists unearthed the arm and foot bones of elephants that lived around 9 million years ago. They also found fossils of early horses, giraffes, and even saber-toothed cats. They've already identified 43 distinct types of animals from this site and collected more than 4,000 fossils. One more cool find from Turkey is a 64,000-year-old workshop inside Enkaja Cave. It looks like people used it for 24,000 years non-stop. There are some tools inside, like flakes and blades, which were made inside the workshop. In eastern Turkey, a farmer accidentally found a 1,000-square-foot mosaic from the late Roman or early Byzantine period just beneath the dirt. Experts say it's a one-of-a-kind thing from this region, and it's still in one piece after all this time. The pattern shows dozens of trees, plants, and animals that were found in ancient Turkey. There could be more treasures in the area, so they plan to keep digging. Our final stop will be in Sicily, where archaeologists uncovered a huge ancient thermal complex. Inside, they found 2 rooms with floors covered in colorful mosaic designs, along with a large courtyard surrounded by arched wings. As they kept digging, they discovered more parts of the ancient city. They found new roads and the remains of a huge complex, along with stretches of old stone walls that were part of the city's fortifications. These discoveries are helping scientists imagine what the city might have looked like during ancient times. No one knows for sure whether the bathhouse was built by the Greeks or the Romans, since both civilizations lived in Sicily long ago. Something strange is lurking beneath the sands of Giza, and scientists have no idea what it is. Archaeologists just found a hidden structure near the Great Pyramid using advanced ground scanning technology. What's inside? Nobody knows, but excavations are already underway. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most famous monuments on Earth, but it doesn't stand alone. It's surrounded by an ancient necropolis, a massive royal graveyard filled with tombs and monuments. They belong to pharaohs, nobles, and other high-ranking officials. Most of these tombs are above the ground. They're called mastabas, rectangular, flat-roofed tombs built from limestone or mud brick, and they've been studied for decades. But from old movies, we know that these weren't simple graves. They have deep vertical shafts leading to underground burial chambers, where the past was sealed away for eternity. And recently, archaeologists found one curious empty space in the cemetery, a completely unexplored patch of ground. No mastabas, no visible ruins, nada. For years they ignored it, but between 2021 and 2023, they decided to investigate. They didn't dig though. Instead, they used a technology that kind of acts like X-rays for the ground. These radars let scientists see the secrets hidden there. And there was something hidden beneath the sand, something deliberately buried and forgotten. A 2-part underground structure. One part was shallow and L-shaped. It's about 33 feet long and buried just 6.5 feet deep. But below that, a deeper, more mysterious anomaly, a structure completely different from anything else in the area. They called it a highly resistive anomaly, which means it's dense and solid, likely made of stone, sand, or even metal. And still, no one has a clue what's inside it. Now, it's clear that humans made the L shape. It wasn't formed by nature. And the shallower structure might have been an entrance to whatever is hidden below. But they only have some theories about what might be hidden there. It's also filled with sand and gravel. It was probably deliberately backfilled after its construction, perhaps to preserve this. Why? Well, we don't know yet. The archaeological team will need to excavate to understand what exactly this thing was and why it was built. The first guess is a lost burial chamber. Many tombs in Giza have underground burial sites, but most have clear surface markers. This one, for some reason, has nothing, but it could be one of them. The second guess is an ancient offering chapel. Egyptologists know that some chapels were built in this shape, but usually they were above ground, not buried like this. And finally, it might be something we've never seen before. If this turns out to be a new type of structure, it could rewrite what we know about the burials of pharaohs. The only way to know for sure is to dig it up, and that's exactly what's happening right now. Excavations are already underway. Archaeologists are racing against time to uncover the truth. But there's a real danger there too. Giza's fragile ancient structures need to be handled carefully. Otherwise, they could be damaged beyond repair. So all we can do is wait for the truth. Now, these tombs always held fascinating mysteries. Unfortunately, we'll never learn tons of these mysteries because of some relentless tomb robbers. Egyptian tombs were built to guard the bodies for eternity. But that absolutely didn't stop people from breaking in and stealing everything valuable inside. They've been bothering these ancient sites for thousands of years, starting way back in Pharaoh's times. Many of the most famous tombs, including those in Giza, Saqqara, and the Valley of the Kings, were looted. It was a common practice in ancient Egypt. And they were serious about this whole thing. They dug secret tunnels to bypass traps and walls, bribed or threatened tomb workers to get inside knowledge, cracked open sarcophagi to grab gold, jewelry, and artifacts. And by the time modern archaeologists got to most of these tombs, they had already been picked clean. The reigning pharaohs got tired of this infuriating nonsense. The Valley of the Kings, the famous burial ground of Egyptian royalty, was supposed to be the ultimate safe zone. Tombs were built deep underground, hidden in the desert. Passages were sealed with giant stone blocks. False doors and traps were added to confuse thieves. Even curses were written on the walls, warnings of horrible endings for anyone who dared to disturb the tomb, which is exactly where we got all those horror stories about mummies from. Spoiler alert, none of it worked. Most tombs in the Valley of the Kings were fully robbed within 100 years of being sealed. Even King Tutankhamun's tomb, one of the most famous in history, was broken into twice in ancient times. Some of them decided to try and fight back. The New Kingdom rulers built hidden unmarked tombs in a way that should have prevented the looters from finding them, but didn't work. Some pharaohs, like Ramses II, were moved in secret to prevent their bodies from being stolen. Nope, didn't matter. The grave robbers always won. That's because tomb raiders weren't just random thieves. They were skilled, organized, and well-connected. They knew exactly where to look. Many were the ones who had built these sites in the first place, and they knew where the entrances were. If they couldn't smash through the doors, they'd dig through the walls, floors, and even ceilings to break inside. They also worked fast, often within a few years after the tombs were sealed, before anyone forgot where the valuable stuff was. The Khufu's pyramid, the one that's next to this newly discovered structure, was looted long before modern times. The one thing left inside when explorers got there? An empty granite box where the sarcophagus used to be. Unfortunately, it's not just about gold. History itself gets stolen during these raids. Ancient Egyptians wrote detailed records of what exactly and where they buried. So when archaeologists compare these lists to what's found, they can see what's missing, which is often everything valuable. Most artifacts don't end up in museums. They just disappear into private collections, where they can never be studied again. Which is, of course, completely unfair. In fact, a few countries have had enough and started passing laws to take historical artifacts back from private collectors. In Italy, if you own an ancient Roman artifact, you must prove you got it legally. China is actively hunting down stolen artifacts, and they must find ways to retrieve it back from the Western collectors. In Egypt, they passed new laws making it illegal for private citizens to own any ancient Egyptian artifacts at all. Other countries, like the US, the UK, Germany, or Switzerland, are completely fine with rich guys owning their history. The British Museum is built on looted things. European empires invaded half the planet and took whatever they wanted back home. Their museums are often full of such stolen artifacts, and unfortunately, they refuse to give most of them back. For example, the Rosetta Stone. It was taken from Egypt by Napoleon's army, then stolen again by the British after they beat the French. Egypt has been demanding to return for years, but they still can't get it back. or the Parthenon marbles. These magnificent massive Greek structures were taken from the Parthenon in Athens by a British lord in the 19th century. Greece has been begging for them back ever since, but the UK doesn't feel like it. Not to mention tons of Mesoamerican artifacts scattered in various museums across the world. European explorers raided Mayan and Aztec temples, took statues, jewelry, and sacred objects, and now Mexico is fighting to get them back. Well, wouldn't it be surprising even if this mysterious underground chamber has somehow been looted already? But if it's a newly found place, could it be one of the few that escaped the hands of grave robbers? Could there still be ancient artifacts, untouched for 4,500 years? We can only hope that those guys didn't get there first.
Big news! Santa is real, and he looks like this. I know it's not exactly how we pictured the jolly old guy, but a recently discovered tomb might just be the proof we've been waiting for to show that St. Nicholas was real and Turkish. Turns out, he wasn't a North Pole native, but a kind-hearted bishop from the 4th century, famous for giving gifts to everyone. The legend says he was a wealthy man born in the ancient city of Patara, modern-day Turkey, who traveled to the countryside to help the poor and the sick. For centuries, though, people couldn't be sure he actually existed. Some historical sources say he was buried in Myra, which is now called Demre, Turkey. Since the 80s, archaeologists have been digging around this area, trying to prove it. And now, their Christmas miracle has finally come true. After digging 6 feet deep in an annex of St. Nicholas's church, they uncovered a mysterious limestone tomb, about 2 meters long. While they're pretty sure this is St. Nick's final resting place, they're still searching for an inscription to confirm its exact age. Now, if we're talking about the fictional Santa Claus, legend says his home is in Lapland, Finland. Back in 2018, archaeologists made an interesting discovery that could finally prove that Santa was real. They were digging at a site called Tiny Aro when they stumbled upon about 200 burial pits. But when they looked inside, there was definitely no sign of Santa. Actually, there were no human skeletons at all, just a bunch of things like pottery and animal bones. So no one really knows what this place was. That was the complete opposite of what happened with a group of archaeologists working in the ancient city of Petra, Jordan. Since 2003, there have been rumors about hidden chambers beneath the famous monument called Al-Khazneh, also known as the Treasury. 21 years later, a team finally decided to dig and uncovered an intact tomb. Inside, they found at least 12 human skeletons and artifacts, estimated to be over 2,000 years old. Hundreds of thousands of tourists travel to Al-Khazneh every year, and most of them probably go there to see the site of the Holy Grail in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So, do you want to know the funny part? One of the skeletons in the tomb was clutching a ceramic chalice that looked a lot like the Holy Grail. You probably remember the devastating fire that caused massive damage to Notre Dame in Paris back in 2019. Because of that, the building, originally built between the 12th and 13th centuries, had to be restructured. But archaeologists saw it as a golden opportunity to dig into the site and uncover its hidden secrets. The team was only allowed to dig about 16 inches beneath the floor, but that was enough. As soon as they removed the floor tiles and cleared away a thin layer of dirt, they spotted the top of a lead coffin. Then, they found some limestone sculptures, including life-sized heads and torsos. Altogether, they uncovered over 1,000 fragments of different works of art. Ancient statues have been found in the most random places, including a sewer. In July 2024, Bulgarian archaeologists were checking a Roman sewer in the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica when they found a nearly 7-foot-tall marble statue of Hermes, the Greek messenger deity. This town was completely devastated and abandoned after 2 earthquakes, one in the year 388 and the other in the year 425. But somehow, it didn't destroy this statue. In fact, its head was found in surprisingly good condition. Finding ancient artwork is definitely fascinating, but imagine stumbling upon an entire hidden city in the Amazon rainforest. Using high-tech lasers, researchers uncovered a lost civilization with thousands of structures and a whole network of roads, canals, and houses, all buried beneath the dense jungle. This city was built around 2,500 years ago, in an area located in the shadow of a volcano, which, by the way, could have erupted and destroyed this civilization at some point. It's hard to say exactly how many people lived there, but experts estimate they stayed up there for about 1,000 years. This discovery proves ancient people also had huge organized cities in the middle of the Amazon. A similar thing happened in Campeche in southern Mexico. An archaeologist was doing some research on the internet when he accidentally discovered a hidden Maya city. This area, now called Valeriana, was huge, about the size of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. It had pyramids, sports fields, amphitheaters, and paths connecting different districts. Thanks to satellite images, archaeologists uncovered an entire unknown civilization from the Bronze Age. They were checking out aerial images when they discovered 100 prehistoric settlements in the Pannonian Plain, a region that includes parts of what's now Serbia and Hungary. The people who lived there are now known as the Titsa site group, and it looks like they were a pretty well-organized society, skilled at growing food, hunting, and fishing. Google Earth helped a team to uncover a mysterious set of 400 ancient gates in Saudi Arabia. These gates, scattered across the desert, are thought to be from thousands of years ago. They're made of stone and arranged in weird formations that have left archaeologists scratching their heads. I mean, they don't look like they were meant for funerals, and they don't seem like structures where people lived. So, we still have no idea what they are. Technology is really changing archaeology. Thanks to artificial intelligence and, well, a $1 million prize, we've finally been able to decipher part of an unreadable and super damaged ancient scroll. The Herculaneum scrolls were discovered by workers digging up the ancient town of Herculaneum near Pompeii in 1752. But their condition was so bad that, for years, they were considered indecipherable. Thankfully, AI has helped unveil their secrets. Based on the studies so far, experts believe that one of these scrolls was written by a philosopher who valued pleasures, like music and food, above all else. No doubt, Stonehenge in England is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Some theories even suggest it was built by extraterrestrials. After more than a century of research, archaeologists are still figuring out how it came together. See that big altar in the middle? Turns out it came all the way from Scotland. And that's pretty wild, considering this massive sandstone block weighs over 6 tons, and the people who built Stonehenge more than 4,000 years ago didn't have the luxury of wheels or modern tools. We can find some pretty amazing stuff in the oceans too. In 2013, a mysterious shipwreck was found about 20 feet underwater off the coast of Kenya. At the time, no one knew where it came from, but now, researchers are pretty sure this could be a ship from Vasco da Gama's fleet. You know, the famous Portuguese navigator, best known for being the first to sail from Europe to India by rounding Africa's Cape of Good Hope. If it's confirmed, this shipwreck could be one of the earliest European shipwrecks in the Indian Ocean. Ancient treasures can take many forms, including a bottle. Recently, archaeologists in Norway uncovered a 150-year-old message in a bottle during an excavation of a Viking burial mound. The bottle contained a letter written by Anders Lorange, an archaeologist who worked on the site back in the 1800s, along with his business card and a few coins wrapped in paper. The letter gave some details about the excavation, though it seems Lorange got a few things wrong, like the exact number of Viking shields discovered. At the end of the letter, he wrote a personal note in runic script, "Emma Gade, my girlfriend." So it gave us not only insights into history, but also a peek into his love life. We all know some iconic symbols. The Statue of Liberty screams USA. The Eiffel Tower represents Paris. And this mask? Undoubtedly, it's Tutankhamun's, right? Sometimes it feels like historians have squeezed every last drop out of the King Tut story. But guess what? The most obvious details often slip right under our noses. like the fact that this famous mask didn't actually belong to him, nor was it ever meant for him. Stick with me for the details. Can we get a close-up of that mask? Thanks. See those holes? Yep, they're for earrings. And no, it's not that they had anything against jewelry, but back in ancient Egypt, earrings were typically worn by high-status women or kids. Now, if you know your history, you might say, but Tut was a boy king, wasn't he? You're spot on. He began his reign at just 9 years old. Sadly, that didn't last long as he passed away at a very young age. So when he was 9, he might have worn earrings, but he probably took them off when he hit that no earrings age. Sounds reasonable, right? Actually, not quite. That would have been pretty strange since nobody expected him to pass away young. Certainly not at 9. So no one was preparing a kid's mask for a burial. It's this untimely demise that suggests the mask used was simply the best option available when Tut passed away. There are more clues pointing to the idea that the mask was found in a hurry. Let's think about this. Even though Tut was mummified and his body could wait a bit, his loved ones wanted him to reach the afterlife ASAP. Some experts even believe the paint in the tomb was still wet when it was sealed. But look at his mask. It's a masterpiece. There's no way it was made in a rush. It's way more elaborate than other simpler cartonnage pieces. The renowned mask of King Tut stands 21 inches tall, adorned with precious stones, and features a golden beard that weighs 5.5 pounds, making the entire mask 22.5 pounds. Okay, I'm a bit confused here. So it seems like it was probably a kid's mask, but it had a beard? I've never seen a 9-year-old with a goatee, and I'm guessing you haven't either. Just think about it. A grown man's face compared to a kid's face. Fun fact for you, our faces pretty much stopped growing at the age of 16, so by 19, Tut would have definitely had the face of an adult man. Can you imagine trying to fit a relatively small kid's mask on a grown man? That would have been super embarrassing, and no one would have let that happen. Right, let's dismiss the kids theory. Now the second option, if you remember, is that the mask could have originally belonged to a woman. This is where the beard theory comes into play. Some researchers believe the beard might have been added later on. Here's another twist. What if the mask was actually made for Nefertiti herself, who ended up maskless? In this case, there are two discoveries. Two birds with one stone. For now, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know. But let's give it a shot and delve deeper into the details. So, Tut passed away in around 1323 BCE, probably due to malaria. He had other health issues too, like when he broke his leg, and records suggest he wasn't in the best shape. As for Nefertiti, we have no solid data about her demise. Plus, nobody knows exactly when or where she was buried. The supposed year when she passed away is around 1330 BCE, but she could have lived longer, and the mask was intended and prepared for her. Or maybe they just took her mask right from the burial chamber. After all, they were family. Well, sort of. She was said to be his stepmom, having been married to Akhenaten, who was likely Tut's father. But this is not 100% accurate. Some scientists doubt it. Ah, these ancient Egyptian families. It's hard to keep track of who's who. I know, you're not yet convinced that Tut wore a lady's mask. Let me share one more theory with you. Meet Howard Carter, the enthusiastic archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. It was located in the Valley of Kings outside Luxor, and, to everyone's surprise, was nearly intact. When he entered, he noticed something odd. This didn't feel like a pharaoh's burial chamber. It was classy and all, but it had a vibe that suggested it was made for a woman. Typically, Egyptian pharaohs had larger tombs that suited them better, and even more strangely, it was oriented to the right of the entrance. This didn't add up. That orientation was typical for female chambers, which Egyptian queens used. Another red flag was that the chamber appeared to have been built in stages, and all the artifacts, around 2,000 of them, seemed hastily placed there. Even more curious, they looked like they were meant for other royals. Carter discovered this burial site in 1922, but it remained a mystery as to why it was so bizarre. Almost a century later, Nicholas Reeves thought he may have solved the puzzle. He claimed that King Tut might not have been the original resident of the tomb. Instead, he suggested that the undisturbed resting place of the legendary Queen Nefertiti could be hidden behind the walls of the boy king's burial chamber. Nicholas studied high-resolution photos for months, meticulously examining every pixel. One day, he focused on detailed scans that revealed the texture of the tomb's walls beneath layers of paint. He spotted what he believed to be outlines of two doorways that had been blocked and plastered over to hide them from view. The more he looked, the more it seemed real. Could it be a tomb within a tomb? Nicholas theorized there was a hidden storeroom behind the western wall of King Tut's tomb, and his chamber might just be the outermost section of a larger corridor-style network of rooms. It all sounds fancy, but sorry to break it to you, Reeves' theory was debunked. To find out if he was onto something, experts had to use ground-penetrating radar to see the unseen. Reeves' idea was that if there were gaps, it could indicate the presence of additional rooms. And at first, in 2015, one expert even thought he had found a hidden room. But the glory didn't last for long. A year later, after double-checking, it turned out there were no hidden doorways. By the way, Nefertiti isn't the only legendary woman from Egypt whose burial site remains a captivating mystery. There's a cool legend about Cleopatra that you might enjoy. It's said that she once declared, "No man will ever find my tomb." Kind of fitting, right? After all, the person who's come closest to uncovering her final resting place is a woman. Fast forward a few millennia after she passed away, and while no man has located it, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez believes she might have cracked the code. She's been on the quest for Cleopatra VII's tomb for nearly 20 years, and recently discovered a bust that she thinks represents the famous queen. However, not everyone is on board with her claim. Some experts argue that the bust doesn't resemble Cleopatra at all. Alongside this intriguing marble statue, Martinez's team also unearthed 337 coins, some of which, less controversially, feature Cleopatra's likeness. But the real part is that it's still not officially confirmed. There's no doubt about the existence of the small bust. It's carved from white marble, fits in one hand, and shows a woman wearing a royal crown, according to a translated statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The big question, though, is who it actually depicts. While Martinez insists this statue is a representation of Queen Cleopatra VII, many other archaeologists argue that the facial features don't match, suggesting it likely belongs to a princess instead. Sorry, I can't resist the temptation of breaking the magic for a moment. Some folks believe that the whole idea of "no man will find my tomb" is misunderstood. Even if she did say it, what she probably meant was "no living soul," and it wasn't about gender at all. It can as well be just a beautiful legend. Toodaloo!